So housing have arrived, and I was talking to the young guy about what's going to be happening, whatever. And they did know. He says, "We do know there's a manhole." So I was like, "All right." So he says, they'll put the sump in over where it's the worst, the hole, and then they'll track the draining. So they're going to track draining across my garden, down and across. So I says to him, "See if you could track the draining to come under, see the eave of my shed, because in the summer it gets no rain and then it dries out and it's awful. So if it had moisture going that way, that would be great." And so they have to take up my stepping stones and all. And then he says to me there, I'm delighted. So he says to me, "Yeah, when we're done, we're going to topsoil it and seed it with grass seed." I was all, I'm delighted. You're surrounded my misery. So I'm just back from boarding my dogs. It's 5 to 10. I don't hear no work happening. There is no work happening. But, I'm told they'll be there between 8 and half 8. Being here and working is two different things. And this is just, do you know what? This is going to be like the scaffolding across the street that I watched. It took them nearly a whole day to get the scaffolding up. But it came down so quickly on a Monday morning. I was like, right. This is why there is no money in our public services, because it's being wasted paying people who are not good at their jobs. And I mean efficiency. I'm not talking like the quality of the work, because that has to at least be passable to be on a public contract. But this is just madness. Like, do you know what I'm wondering? Who audits our public services? Who makes sure that their spending is efficient, their management is efficient, their running of our services is efficient? Because it doesn't seem to me like anybody does. There may be bodies and regulatory bodies that are put in place to make it look like they do these things, but by the fucking state of services, I don't think they do. So, okay, so who audits our public services? That is the Northern Ireland Audit Office, right? The NIAO. So I have vaguely heard of them. So an independent watchdog. I love it when they say independent, because when you follow who they're paid by, it's usually government money. So they still work for the government. The government controls them. No money, no service. Anyway, the NIO provides assurance to the Northern Ireland Assembly and the public that money is being spent properly and effectively. Its main functions are financial audit, value for money, comptroller function, counter fraud, whistleblowing. Whistleblowing as in acting as a prescribed person for public interest disclosure regarding the conduct of public businesses. Kind of what I do for free. So they have Oversight and Partnerships, Public Accounts Committee, the National Audit Office, and NIP. So I asked, does it routinely check services for competency? So it says it depends on the sector and the type of audit. For local councils, competency is checked annually by law. For central government departments, checks on effectiveness are more selective and risk-based. So if the service users are not shouting and raising issues, then the services are just going to get overlooked. They're not going to have any risk-based audits done. So they'll be selective. And because it just seems that public services and regulators and ombudsmen and all just seem to be half-assing their job. It's more performative than productive. I have no faith that, they'll be on top of this, because look how bad shit's getting. I mean, I really wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if services functioned properly and lawfully. So then I asked the search, so it only audits the finance side of public services, and says no, 65 to 70% of its core functions are the financial auditing, but it also deep dives into how competently and effectively services are being run. Are they? So they do value for money audits,
economy was it bought at the best price, efficiency, how much output was produced for the resources used, and effectiveness? Did the service actually achieve its intended goal? Performance improvement assessments, improvement audits, checking if councils have set proper targets for getting better. I'm still not really seeing anything about the actual service provision and respective service users popping up here. This is the whole point of public services. Oh, wait, shit, sorry. Northern Ireland, it's all for the economy. So, improvement audits, checking if councils have set proper targets for getting better. Better at what? Improvement assessments, judging whether a council is actually likely to deliver those improvements in the future. What improvements? Improvements to what? Special inspections, if there are serious concerns about a council's competency, a special inspection can be ordered to examine their compliance with continuous improvement duties, where the line is drawn. While the NIAO can be very critical of how a service is managed, they are strictly prohibited from questioning the merits of government policy. I wonder why. Because it would stop their funding. Ask how often do they audit NIHE? So it says the NIHE is subject to different types of audits by NIAO, depending on whether they are checking finances or overall service competency. So financial audits or annual service competency and value for money, there's no set schedule for checking service competency. The NIHE participates in a national fraud initiative every 2 years. Now, let's bring it all back to what I keep talking about this letting tenants know, making an appointment. That failure to uphold that policy, but yet contractors then will say refused access and still bill the housing executive. That is fraud. That is fraud of public money. So where is NIAO around all this, right? The last time they had this was the last time they had an anti-fraud audit was the 2022 to 2024 cycle. So they're due one now. My timing's pretty good, eh? So then I asked, I want to know about their competency for service provision and selection of contractors, right? NIHE we're talking about. So the NIAO and the Northern Ireland Assembly's Public Accounts Committee have historically identified serious weaknesses in the Northern Ireland Housing Executive's competency regarding contract management and service provision. Then says, while recent years have seen shifts towards social value and procurement, past reports highlighted a double paying scandal, I did not know about this, and a failure to robustly challenge poor contractor performance. So I'm going to click the link. The link brings me to an article by The Detail dated the 5th of July 2013, and the headline is New Report Finds Housing Executives Still Double Paying Contractors. So the 2013, the housing executive this morning again finds itself again at the centre of a financial controversy with another damning report. See the amount of damning reports that happened in Northern Ireland and nothing changes. Let's look back to the tribunal, still sitting under the Department for Economy, not Justice, so it's screwing over every worker in Northern Ireland, even these contractors. But anyway, controversy with another damning report concluding that contractors have continued to be overpaid for work which they haven't carried out during the last year. Housing benefit fraud. The report estimates that fraud and error in housing benefit rose by 50% last year by 10 million. Auditors found that 20.8 million was made in overpayments with a further 4.7 being underpaid due to staff error. Worryingly, the level of overpayments due to official error appears to have increased substantially. Tell me there's not corruption in our public services. Worryingly, the level of overpayments... Oh, sorry, I've already said that. In addition, I also note that the estimated level of underpayments due to official error has increased substantially when compared with 2011 by 30% to 4.7 million. The level of fraud now more appears to be higher than at any time in the previous 5 years. Well, here we are, 2026. How many years on from this article? What did I say? 2013. We're 13 years, nearly 13 years on from this. And has it got any better? No. What they've done is they've tidied up how they do it, but the con still happens. Next paragraph. The Northern Ireland Audit Office report comes less than 24 hours after the announcement of a Stormont Assembly inquiry to investigate the allegations that DSD Minister Nelson McCausland and First Minister Peter Robinson had attempted to place undue pressure on the Housing Executive not to suspend the maintenance contract of Red Sky in 2011. As Social Development Minister, Mr McCausland has been highly critical of the Housing Executive and its then Chairman Brian Rowntree. Mr Rowntree resigned last year, days before Mr McCausland published a damning report into NIHE's lack of financial control over maintenance contracts. I'm going to go down a rabbit hole that I don't have time to go down today. So I read that article, and then at the end of the article, it gives you the link to the report, right? So I threw the report into AI and asked it to summarize. And what it has told me is, okay, so maintenance and contractor. So the 2013 report by the Comptroller and Auditor General qualified its audit opinion on the NIHE due to serious failures in contractor management and housing benefit accuracy, right? And it's not housing benefit claimants fraudulence. There is a bit of that, but it's actually more about service provider management. So maintenance and contract failures. The CNAG qualified the regularity of 145.6 million in maintenance spending due to a breakdown in controls over work quality and payments. 18 million overpayment, lacks procedures based on trust rather than inspection. What am I saying? Led to an estimated 18 million in potential overpayments to contractors since 2008. Per inspection standards, internal reviews found that 62% of districts visited had limited or unacceptable standards of contract inspection. Systemic issues, contractors were paid for work not completed, charged for excessive materials, or paid twice for the same job. Nepotism. Kitchen schemes. In a sample of 20 kitchen replacement schemes, overpayments range from 2% to over 40% per project. Housing benefit fraud and error. The report also qualified that 632 million housing benefit expenditure due to material levels of fraud and error. Right now, I stopped there when I quickly glanced this because I wanted to know what did that mean exactly, and that is where it'll later tell me that it's service provision management and a bit of service user fraud, but it's mostly service provision management, right? So total loss estimated irregular payments reached 25.5 million, which is 4.2% of total expenditure. Official errors made directly by NIHE staff increased significantly, partly due to the high workload following the introduction of the Atlas electronic notification system. Oh, Jesus Christ, and things still have not got any better. Customer fraud. Estimated fraud cases such as undeclared earnings or partners tripled compared to the previous year, reaching 9.2 million. Rent arrears. Total tenant debt increased to 14.6 million, with concerns that future welfare reform would further worsen collection rates. Benefit debt. The gross amount of housing benefit overpayments owed to the NIHE rose to 46.9 million. Who from? Like, from the government, or, you know, workers who pay their own rent? So housing benefit people, or, yeah, the gross amount of housing benefit overpayments owed. So that's the government. Hold on, did I clarify? Right, went off on a tangent. I'll explain it after. I'll finish what I'm saying. So tenancy fraud. The NIHE began developing a formal strategy to tackle people living in social housing who are not entitled to. Jesus, all of this just kind of smacks of, we don't actually give a fuck about service users, but money. So anyway, so then I explain materials, levels of fraud and error, and it says it means the amount of money lost or mismanaged is significant enough to change the overall picture of a department's finances. And then I said, so this is a a service provision error, not a service user act of fraud. It says actually it is both, but the report specifically highlights service provision errors as a major reason for the audit failure. So then I went on, there's more to that, but I'll not bog you down with all it because I know this is all kind of. The gross amount of housing benefit overpayments owed to the NIHE rose to 46.9 million. This is monies owed by UK Gov, question mark, right? So I pulled that out from the information above because I was like, the way it's worded, the gross amount of housing benefit overpayments. And I was like, but this is the housing benefit is managed by the government. It's not within the hands of the service user unless, they claim and then pay. Most people, I think, these days just have it direct going there. So I was like, oh. So it says, no, this is not money owed by the UK government. Instead, it is money owed to the public purse by individual claimants and landlords. When the report mentions 46.9 million in gross debt recoverable, it refers to housing benefit that was paid out to people who were not actually entitled to it. The NIHE is legally required to try to get this money back from these specific individuals. So then I went on to say, but housing benefit is a government paid benefit, so how can liability be on the tenants? So it says, although housing benefit is a government funded benefit, the legal liability for an overpayment falls on the person who received the extra money to which they were not entitled. So then I said, so tenants are responsible for the errors of the public system. Overpayments also occur when tenants have been open and transparent, which they have. Been there. And then I remember, this is making me remember when I was applying for child benefit and all that when I had my first child, and my husband had just finished his apprenticeship, so we actually didn't know what his annual wage was, so we filled in everything except we just put 0 in that box because we didn't know. Now bear in mind as well, at this point we were 21, so fairly young and naive to all these fucking systems, right? And so we fed the forms in and that was grand, and then we started to get payments, and I was like, this seems really high. if this isn't wrong, like, why is everybody having kids? And it turned out we were being overpaid, and it took 7 years or something to repay that back, all because in that one box we just put a 0. We put in where he worked, how many hours he worked, blah blah blah. I was a student at the time, so I didn't have work information, and it was all because it was fed into a machine. Nobody read the form, and since that day it has pissed me off no end that our public services keep taking humans out of the equation, humans from human services, understanding and all that there, because then the system becomes very restrictive and easy to control and oppress people. Doesn't give us much of a quality of life though. All right, so then the answer to tenants being responsible. This is a common point of frustration for many, as the rules for public benefit systems can feel very lopsided. In the eyes of the law, all overpayments are technically recoverable, even if the error was 100% the fault of the public system, NIHE, Department of Work and Pensions, and you were completely transparent. However, there is a very important exception that can protect you from having to pay. So when an official error is not recoverable, in case this is helpful to anybody, if the overpayment was caused by an official error, the NIHE is legally barred, or whatever public body it is legally barred from recovering all the money only if all 3 of the following conditions are met. 1, the error was 100% official. It was a mistake, act, or omission by whatever department. Like they ignored a letter you sent or made a calculation mistake. You didn't contribute. You provided all the correct information and didn't misrepresent your situation. Kind of like what I was saying, but we're in a gray area because we did put a 0 in the box. But if human eyes had seen that form, they would have called us and went, "What's this figure?" No. You couldn't have known. You could not reasonably have been expected to realize you were being overpaid at the time. So that's my wee rabbit hole with that. And as I've been making all these, the works are still happening. So look. Like, that's probably as deep as from my knee to my foot.